All right, it's time to talk about the Sony conference. I'm a little late in reacting to this. Been working on a book project, so I had an opportunity after getting some things done to talk to you about what I saw. Want to remind you before I talk about the specifics and I talk about the overall grade, I want to talk about or remind you what my criteria are. And really, there are two things that I look for when I personally give a grade. The first thing is the flow of the presentation. How does it flow? How does it move along? Are there wasteful moments? Are there technical issues? Are there things that could have been eliminated to speed things up? Does it feel like it's being drawn out? These things figure into making a presentation a good presentation. If you're wasting people's time, if you're making an hour and a half feel like an hour and a half, that's not necessarily a good presentation. You want that hour and a half to feel like 45 minutes. Where did the time go? There was just so much stuff to take in. Microsoft came closest to that. Also, Squaresoft's very brief half-hour presentation with no talking whatsoever and just a barrage of trailers, even though that was a half an hour. That kind of fills what my ideal is for a presentation, whether it's live or it's pre-recorded. Very much to the point, very succinct. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, this hits on a few different points. Did the company sell me on something, and did the company make me feel good about owning their particular platform? When we're talking about Microsoft, Sony, and tomorrow with Nintendo, do these companies make me feel secure or make me feel better about buying the system, about making that initial purchase? And also, are they convincing me to spend money on the games that they're showing, or have they convinced me that maybe these games really aren't for me and I should do something else? So, these things in mind, let's talk about this event because there is quite a lit to talk about, and unfortunately, not all of it is related to the games. It's really difficult to talk about the Sony event without talking about its pacing because for the first half of the show, it was pretty rough. I do appreciate what Sony executives are trying to do in trying to make a new kind of experience, trying to key on certain tentpole titles that they have in mind that they really want to focus on. It's not really the way that you expect most E3 events to go, and that's fine, but the conference still has to flow in such a way that you're making the idea work. And what Sony did here, unfortunately, did not do this. The first game that they were going to talk about was The Last of Us 2, but before we even knew what this was, we had a guy with a banjo on stage playing for 5 minutes. And this was extremely reminiscent of the Andrew WK performance at Bethesda the night before. There are going to be people that like these musical performances, and that's fine, but again, this is an E3 video game press conference. We are not selling albums here. We're not selling OSTs here. We're trying to sell games. And while the music is certainly fine and it sets the mood, it is a waste of time. It does not need to be there. You can set the stage a lot quicker if you just play a few measures of the music before you go in and play the gameplay or a video trailer. So that was rough, and you could tell it was rough because when following along on social media, you can see the line of people in my feed saying the same thing. Why is this guy playing a banjo? What is taking so long? What are we waiting for? It feels like a waste of time in that instance. It was a good idea, I guess, trying to harken back to when Sony had their symphony orchestra playing or whatever it was, but to be honest, that was a waste of time back then too. Then we get to The Last of Us gameplay, and it is gameplay, which is a great way to lead off. The game looks fantastic. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I did not play The Last of Us. Any game with stealth gameplay, forget it. I'm not going there. So I knew that I wasn't interested in this game anyway, and I did not change my mind after looking at this trailer. But what did stick out to me were two things. First of all, the game looks amazing. I know, or at least I believe, that we're probably 2 years away from the rollout of the next generation of consoles. But looking at this game, you know that there's still some life left in the old consoles that we have now. The lighting, the level of detail, the texturing, it looks so good. The facial mapping, the facial motion and capture, it just looks so good. And this is something that Naughty Dog excels in. They continue to set the standard, and it does. It looks amazing. The game does have a lot of gratuitous violence. It's the second game now that I saw today that showed a female killing machine. The first one being Lara Croft from Shadow of the Tomb Raider during the Square conference, or the Square presentation, I should say. I don't necessarily have a problem with violence in and of itself. It is 2018. I think we're used to video games being graphically violent at this point, but some of the stuff was just so graphic and so gratuitous, and it's kind of creepy. I understand that they're using the extreme violence to set the stage or to make a point or whatever it is they're trying to do, but it doesn't come across like a good thing. It comes across like too much. At least to me, it did. I'm not knocking the conference on that, by the way. It's just an observation. So, The Last of Us gameplay stuff wraps up. The lights dim, and then we're thrown to a Sony stage where they have some representatives from the company. And it's a commercial break. They're actually taking the people, the press, and everybody who's attending, and they're moving them to another room. So this is a forced intermission, and what's happening is these guys are stalling for time while these people are moving from one room to the next. And they're stalling for time by kind of talking amongst each other, showing random trailers, like they showed a trailer for Black Ops 4, which again is fine. They let slip that Black Ops 3 is a game for PlayStation Plus users. You can download that. You can download that right now, in fact, for free. That was cool, although you'd think that would get just a little more fanfare. But it just, again, you go from stop with the banjo guy to full on go with The Last of Us 2, where you got people really into it and on the hook, and then it stops again, stops dead, because we're just talking like we're analyzing a conference that hasn't even happened yet. So at this point, we're at an F. Despite The Last of Us 2 being so amazing looking, we are at an F. There's no way around this. It does not get any better, because when we move to the next segment after the talking is over, instead of a banjo, we have someone playing a woodwind as they're getting ready to set the stage for the next game that Sony is showing, which is a samurai type game. The Ghost of Tsushima, I believe it's called. So again, we're sitting through a long musical performance. So this is now worse than Bethesda was the night before. Now we have two musical performances that are about 5 minutes that we're sitting through. And these, for the purpose of setting the stage, are taking way too long. When this finally ends, we start to see a gameplay video, and again, absolutely gorgeous looking game with lighting. One of the things that I liked as a weather buff is you could see in the distance, you could see precipitation and showers coming down in the distance. You can actually see like the heft or the heaviness in the clouds as it kind of hangs down towards the ground. The game does have like a Bushido blade type feel with very deliberate combat. Again, lots of violence here, but again, it's a samurai game, so what are you going to do? The game looks great. Not necessarily my kind of gameplay. I tend to be more fast-paced, almost like a Platinum Games-ish, because I'm an arcade guy. But I can't deny how gorgeous the game looks. Would like to see just a little bit less in the way of violence. Again, after being grossed out by The Last of Us 2, this was not helping. But I'm not going to knock the game for that. How do I feel about the game? I'm not sure. I'm not really driven to buying it at this point, but I am not totally put off from it either. It's very much a wait and see. Finally, after this ends, we start to get to the meat of the presentation. Sony starts to pick up the pace a little bit. There's no more throwing it to the booth with some people talking. We're now just into the presentation and things are being shown. Things like Nioh 2, which we didn't know was going to be a thing. That certainly excited fans. Things like an extended Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer, which looks really good, I thought. They showed things we had not seen up to now. So they showed a Pirates of the Caribbean stage with someone who sounded a lot like Johnny Depp, but I'm not sure that it was him. I'm definitely interested in this game, even though I have no bloody idea what the story is. A lot of people are talking about the cringeworthy dialogue. I don't know. Playing Kingdom Hearts for the story, just you can't. Even people with like master's degrees in literature cannot understand how this story works. But playing it for the combat, playing it for the settings, playing it for the Disney characters, that's what it's all about. And the game does, at least to me, it looks pretty fantastic. And I have to admit, when I hear the music, that whether it's the new song that's being performed or whether it's music within the game, it just makes me feel good. So was excited for that one. There was a little bit of a surprise, and it was a happy surprise. Capcom strikes again, this time with a remake of Resident Evil 2, which looks absolutely incredible. Unfortunately, I am not the target audience for this game. I've played the original Resident Evil 2, and I just was not very good at it. Games with a lot of item management, I don't get. I'm an arcade guy again, so I'm used to just running in and killing things. I am not used to running away from or trying to avoid things. But that said, again, just like the other games, Resident Evil 2 is a graphic looker, and I'm very happy for fans there. The Death Stranding trailer, Hideo Kojima just playing with our minds once again. Now I understand that Kojima is not the most obvious or direct person when it comes to how he presents his games. He likes to mess with your mind. He likes to tell stories from a different angle, a different perspective, and really mess with you. A lot of twists and turns. We've known about this game for some time, and with all the trailers that have been shown, we still don't know what the hell is going on. We don't know anything really about the characters. We know that Norman Reedus is carrying a backpack, and he has a baby fetus that he carries with him. He does a lot of walking. There's a little bit of combat, or almost combat, here and there. Is that Lindsay Wagner in the trailer? I think it might have been. It's weird. Now, it's even weird for Kojima. Now, this is a guy whose work I've generally liked, whether it's been the Metal Gear games or the Zone of the Enders games. Unfortunately, I have not played Snatcher, so don't ask me about that one. But this, I don't know how to feel about it. And unfortunately, after Metal Gear Solid 5, my ability to blind trust what Kojima brings to the table is gone. I need to actually be sold. I can't just buy it because he's involved in the project. I didn't see enough here, so more work needs to be done to sell me on the game. The general response that I've seen in social media, there's about half the people that are really excited about it because they've been excited about this project for a long time, ever since PT went by the boards because Konami was being dumb. While the other half were just kind of confused and even less interested in the game because this trailer, which is really supposed to be the coming out party for the game and to kind of push us forward, really didn't do that. So at least they showed more. And they got people talking, and I suppose that's what you want at the end of the day. So there were definitely trailers. There were definitely things happening. Sony hit the accelerator in the second half of the show, and things improved. And I actually liked the end of the presentation where Spider-Man kind of brought us home. And this is where, at least for me, Sony really had the biggest success because the Spider-Man segment talked me into getting the game. I was on the fence before the event. I'm not really the biggest comic book person. I'm not really the biggest Marvel person. I've seen a few of the movies, but, I'm kind of played out on those. So buying a comic book related game takes a little bit of effort. But what Insomniac has done here, the game looks great. It has those really cool set pieces that make you excited, make you feel part of the game. The combat looks interesting, I think. The characters look interesting. So yeah, I'm on board. I'm going to give the game a shot and see how it is. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, will I get it day one? I'm not exactly sure. I may put it on my Christmas wish list. Hopefully I've been good for Santa Claus this year, although I still have half the year to go in order for him to make that determination, but we will see. And then the show kind of ended, sort of. They did some things off stage afterwards. That I think they announced a VR game from Software. I don't know. I wasn't watching at that point because I was pretty much done. So that was the presentation, pretty much. So if we look at it in two halves, much like we did with the Bethesda conference or the Bethesda presentation, the first half was an F. I'm sorry, the first half was an F. The game should have been really at the forefront, and instead it's a bunch of walking around, it's a bunch of music, and then finally we get to the games like we've earned it after some kind of punishment. So the first half is an F, but after we get through the first half, things got better, and I would give the second half of the show an A. Basically, from the Ghost of Tsushima trailer when it finally started, or footage when it finally started to play, all the way through the rest of the conference, I think that we saw what we wanted to see. There were some things that were missing, and they're not necessarily Sony's fault. Where was the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Who the hell knows? Any news about Shenmue 3 after 3 years or 2 years, whatever it's been? Nope, nothing. These aren't necessarily Sony's fault, like I said, but they're things that are notable, especially the lack of Final Fantasy VII. Square didn't talk about it in its afternoon briefing either, so it leaves the question, where is the game? Is it going to happen for the PS4, or is it going to be a PS5 game? Who knows? We really can't tell. So it's time to give this guy a grade. Again, if we're looking at an F for the first half and an A for the second half, if you average them out, just like Bethesda, you're getting a C. I know that it seems harsh because the games were quite good. But again, we're grading the presentation. We're not grading the games here. We're grading the presentation overall. And the presentation overall was just average. The games saved it from being a complete disaster. And that's too bad. I know that the Sony executives and the Sony team will look at this, will look at the feedback, not my feedback, they don't give a damn what I say, but they'll look at the overall feedback from social media, and they'll probably go back to the drawing board, and I would think they would do something more traditional for next year, especially with, as I believe will happen, we'll start to hear the first rumblings of PlayStation 5. So that's a C. So where are we at so far with one conference to go? We had Electronic Arts with a D. They are still riding the bottom of the totem pole. Then we had Microsoft the next day with a B+. They are so far in the lead, at least for me. Then we had Bethesda that night. Bethesda got a C from me, very similar to the Sony presentation, just without the walking. Then we had the Square presentation today, and I didn't talk about that on camera because I've been working on a certain Super Nintendo guidebook today. But I did watch that, and I gave that a C-. While I like the slick presentation, there really wasn't a lot in terms of surprises there, and a lot of what was there, it was kind of hit or miss. A lot of people were asking questions where the big games were. Again, Final Fantasy VII Remake not being there is a really huge red flag. There were some other things that could have been expected that just weren't there too. So a C- for Square. And then we're back to a C for Sony. So right now, with one show to go, B+ is the grade to beat. Can Nintendo get there? It's worth asking. Nintendo, of course, exercises a pre-recorded presentation rather than a live presentation, which at least in the past has helped in terms of pacing. There's not a lot of wasted time, although there have been some wasted segments in Direct's past. And who knows what Nintendo has in mind for surprises. The Switch is riding a high right now, and I'm sure that Nintendo wants to capitalize on that as much as possible. So we will see how it turns out. That's it for me for now. I will hopefully do another one of these tomorrow night. I won't be able to do one of these tomorrow during the day as I'm back to work on the Nintendo guidebook, or the Super Nintendo guidebook. But make sure you can check me out on Twitter, and you can find out all of what I'm saying as I'm following these events live. As always, thanks for checking out these videos. I really enjoy making them. Got a few more games in the mail today that I'm going to be hopefully getting to for Unsealed once we get through the E3 period. Making a new Unsealed video right now just seems like it would be kind of a waste of time, as everyone wants to talk about what's new. And even though this stuff is technically new, it's not like time-wise new. So we will get to it next week, and I have some really cool stuff to show you, and I can't wait. Thanks for checking this stuff out, and until the next time, my friends, see ya.